This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan's transitional government and several armed groups sign a finalized peace deal in neighboring South Sudan. The latest on U.S. President Donald Trump's condition after being hospitalized with COVID-19. And we look at how a South African painter is infusing realities from the coronavirus pandemic into his art. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Egypt steps up efforts to attract more tourists to its Red Sea region. And in sports, Senegalese forward Sadio Mane becomes second Liverpool player to test positive for COVID-19. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in Sudan, where people are in a celebratory mood. The power-sharing government and a coalition of armed groups have finally signed a peace deal. The leaders say they want to bring peace and democracy to the country after more than a decade of conflict. That journey began a year ago with a preliminary deal in August. However, two major rebel groups did not sign Saturday's landmark deal. The deal sets out terms to integrate rebels into the security forces, be politically represented, and have economic and land rights. A new fund will pay $750 million a year for 10 years to help rebuild the impoverished southern and western. Sudan has been whacked by regional conflicts for decades. Millions of people have been displaced and hundreds of thousands killed. The latest unrest in the country was triggered after the oil-rich South seceded in 2011. All right, Morocco and the United States have signed a 10-year military cooperation deal. This comes 2 days after the U.S. signed a similar deal with Tunisia. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper has been on a North Africa tour aimed at beefing up the fight against jihadists in a war-torn Libya and Sahel region. Morocco hosts the largest annual U.S. joint military exercise in Africa, dubbed African Lion. The U.S., on the other hand, is Morocco's top arms supplier, selling it combat aircraft, ships, tanks, and armored vehicles. Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita said the deal reaffirms that Morocco's alliance with the U.S. is strong and long-term.
Our long-standing alliance has not only endured the test of time. We have stood side by side throughout the major challenges that shaped the 20th century and has transitioned into the 21st century stronger than ever. It has adapted to new, bigger, and more vicious threats, namely terrorism, violent extremism, transnational and cybercrime, illicit trafficking of all kinds, and separatism.
Now more than ever, our two nations are working closely together to tackle the challenges of an increasingly complex security environment, ranging from counterterrorism and other transnational threats to regional instability and broader strategic challenges.
U.S. President Donald Trump says things are going well after being hospitalized for COVID-19. Well, in a separate tweet, he thanked the public for their support. Trump announced his diagnosis on Friday, saying he and First Lady Melania had tested positive for the virus. The White House says Trump has started treatment with the antiviral drug remdesivir and that he has mild symptoms, including fever and shortness of breath. Now, while President Trump continues to receive treatment at the Walter Reed Medical Center, doctors attending to him say that he is doing exceptionally well. Now, this reassurance comes as new cases continue to emerge among some of the president's top advisors and allies.
He's receiving outstanding multidisciplinary care, the state of the science for coronavirus infection. We are monitoring him very closely for any evidence of complications from either the coronavirus illness or the therapies that we are prescribing to make him better. We have monitored his cardiac function, his kidney function, his liver function. All of those are normal. And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing or walking around the White House medical unit upstairs. He's in exceptionally good spirits, and in fact, as we were completing our multidisciplinary rounds this morning, the quote he left us with was, "I feel like I could walk out of here today," and that was a very encouraging comment from the president.
Well, the Ugandan government has revised discharge protocols for COVID-19 patients. Patients will be able to leave hospital before testing negative for the coronavirus. Ugandan hospitals are overwhelmed with cases, and the government is trying to free up hospital beds for more serious cases. Isabel Nakiria has more.
Uganda's Ministry of Health says all mild COVID-19 cases will now stay in hospital for 10 days and be discharged if they have improved. Initially, COVID-19 patients had to wait for at least 2 negative results, done 24 hours apart, to be discharged. Patients had to stay in hospital for at least 14 days before being allowed to go home. The Health Ministry says this will help free up space in hospitals for more serious cases.
COVID-19 cases who do not require supplemental oxygen but may have presented with other symptoms will be discharged at least 10 days after symptom onset, provided symptoms have improved and the patient is at least 24 hours fever-free.
The country recently opened up a temporary COVID-19 treatment facility at a sports stadium, but that has already filled up. Uganda is also advising COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms to receive home-based care. This will only be allowed for patients who have enough space in their homes to self-isolate.
The family needs to be taught how to look out for a worsening situation, a patient who is worsening every day, and know how to manage those symptoms, because if someone did not have fever, now they have fever. They need to be taught to give paracetamol, not to rush to the hospital.
Privately run hospitals are also being allowed to accept COVID-19 patients to ease pressure on public facilities.
The Ministry of Health is conducting an assessment and accreditation exercise to identify and designate private health facilities to provide care for COVID-19 patients who may wish to be treated in the private facilities.
COVID-19 cases in Uganda are nearing the 10,000 mark, and the government is putting emphasis on individual responsibility. They are encouraging social distancing, washing hands, and the wearing of masks. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, in Namibia, COVID-19 infections among students appear to have spiked. Last month, President Hage Geingob lifted a ban on international travel. He also lifted a COVID-19 state of emergency as infection rates began trending downwards. Angela Coppola has the story.
There are 1,920 schools in Namibia, catering for around 804,000 learners. And now there are 345 confirmed cases in high schools alone across the country. Authorities say that of the total, 108 come from the same school.
Moved even away from 7-day school closures up to only between 24 to 48 to 72 hours, depending on the number of cases then that we are having at a school, but always in consultation with the Ministry of Health. And at the respective school in the north where we have more than 108 cases, we have divided the learners specifically at the same school still in 3 categories and put them in designated areas. So you have your positively tested learners separate, and then the learners that were tested and found to be negative, they were also isolated separately. And then, of course, the learners that were not yet tested are also separate.
Authorities say that the Education Ministry has learned lots of lessons since the pandemic struck in March, and that includes the importance and the need for close cooperation between the Ministries of Health and the Ministries of Education. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. Egypt steps up efforts to attract more tourists to its Red Sea region. And we look at how a South African painter is infusing realities from the coronavirus pandemic into his art.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shiwishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Sharia.
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. In a move aimed at diversifying its tourist attractions, Egypt is opening several new museums in the Red Sea region. Cities like Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh will be displaying artifacts, giving tourists a chance to sample the country's unique history. The North African nation hopes the museums will attract new visitors. Adel El-Mahroui reports.
Red Sea cities are the most visited locations in Egypt. With their warm sun and magnificent coral reefs, they attract visitors mostly interested in leisure tourism. But the Tourism and Antiquities Ministry wants to add to that special experience that the Red Sea provides. It's building more museums.
For the first time in the modern history of Egypt, we are finalizing the work of 5 museums at least in the same time. It's hard work for my colleagues in the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquity, and I'm very glad that this dream is coming true.
Hurghada's museum is the first to open its doors to visitors and displays more than 1,700 ancient Egyptian pieces. Museums here on the Red Sea are going to give visitors a unique experience compared to that experienced in the rest of the country. Sharm el-Sheikh is getting exclusive rights to display all the artifacts found in recent excavations at the Saqqara necropolis. That includes colorful coffins and intact mummies from the 26th dynasty. It will also include the biggest scarab statue ever found.
The topic which will be chosen here is Hathor. Hathor is the goddess of music, love, and beauty in ancient Egypt. This museum will focus on the leisure and the beauty on ancient Egypt, and at the same time we'll have a big hall dedicated to other civilizations who visited Egypt, like the Greek, the Roman period.
Egypt has been trying to market Sharm el-Sheikh to Chinese tourists, but those efforts are yet to yield results. These rare artifacts could be the answer. The government has partnered with the private sector to invest in these museums to guarantee the best experience for tourists.
Sharm el-Sheikh Museum will add to the attractions this city offers to its visitors. But more importantly, it's designed to attract new nationalities who are more interested in cultural tourism. Adel El-Mahroui, CGTN, Sharm el-Sheikh.
The National Museums of Kenya has also opened its doors to the public after shutting them in March due to COVID-19. Fort Jesus in Mombasa is among the sites struggling with the loss of revenue from ticket sales over the last 6 months.
Fort Jesus in Kenya's port city of Mombasa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is grappling with the challenges of reopening after closing back in March due to COVID-19.
We depend on the revenue and some funding from the ministry to be able to run the museum. But because the revenue was not coming in, then the restoration, maintaining of some of the preservation activities was now stopped.
One of the research area which was affected was the underwater heritage. We are proposing to build an underwater museum within the coast of Kenya.
There was a serious impact whereby the research had to stop. Then it becomes easy now to camp to the field, meet the fishermen and discuss, carry out field works, do archaeological surveys.
Across the country, museums have adopted measures to ensure the safety of visitors as well as staff. The cultural institutions have come up with new ways to boost engagement, visits, and ultimately revenue.
We now decided to look for other ways, and one of them was online virtual education programs. Last weekend, we had on Saturday, or 26th, we had a program about the Swahili kitchen. We also had a virtual program of the tour, so that visitors at home, they can go online and just have a tour of the fort.
With Kenya slowly easing epidemic restrictions, hopefully more people will visit these cultural sites. Cham Wono, CGTN.
In South Africa, artists have been finding ways to market and sell their work even during a hard lockdown. Contemporary painter Bambo Sabia is presenting his interpretation of not only COVID-19, but also other events that has shaped this year. His exhibition is currently underway at the Everard Reed Gallery in Johannesburg. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela brings us more on the story.
Visual artist Bambo Sabia has created a body of work that he says is in reaction to the unattended weakness and unheeded warnings of the new normal. He says his latest exhibition, called Slow Down Tiger, is showcasing that normal is normal. The award-winning artist reflects on current affairs ranging from the confusing positivity and negativity that emerged from this year's unique lockdown circumstances, while touching on both the humanity and brutality that people witnessed, and how the information overload put people on an emotional roller coaster. There are 9 pieces that are featured in this exhibition. Each piece addresses a different issue.
So I was looking at all the things that were happening in 2020. So I'm looking at the Black Lives Matter. I'm looking at the stolen sisters in Africa. I'm looking at protecting the planet. So everything that has been happening in 2020, I just brought that into one box, one space. As an artist, we address issues. We talk about things that affect us. So I was raising an awareness. I was just making people aware that this thing is real. This thing is affecting us. This thing it's now.
Sabia, who has also exhibited his works internationally, feels that the world needs to pause and reflect because there's so much that has happened this year.
I mean, it's been a tough year. So I'm just saying, you know what, a lot has happened. Let's slow down, as humans. Let's take a pause, and take all in, and we can then respond, There's a lot that has been happening in a short period of time. 2020 brought everything, it was a surprise. We're all taken aback.
Sabia produced this body of work in the middle of a lockdown that was necessitated by the need to fight the spread of the coronavirus, a task that proved to be quite tough, he says. The models he uses to illustrate his artwork, like everyone else in the country, were restricted from moving around.
So I had to tell people to take selfies, pose in a certain way, send me pictures. It was really strange also, really strange. I had to, when I take my pictures, I prepare the space. I make sure the lighting is good. I make sure they're well dressed. I make sure, everything is sitting the way I want. But in this, with this exhibition, I could not do that. People had to do, I had to guide them, and they had to take pictures with their cell phones. The quality, it's a problem. So it was a really, really tough show to produce.
The exhibition is on display for another week. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And we are not done just yet. We'll see you on the other side of the break with your sports news. Here's a look at that headline. In sports, Senegalese forward Sadio Mane becomes